Imagine living 100,000 years ago. No dating apps, no cities, no wedding websites, no private apartments, no restaurants, no parties, no millions of strangers walking past you every day. Your entire world might be a small group of people, maybe a few dozen. You know their faces, you know their voices, you know who is good at hunting, who knows where to find water, who can make fire, who gets angry easily, who you can trust, and who you should stay away from. Then one day, you look around your entire world and realize something strange. If you want children, there aren't exactly many people to choose from. So how did ancient humans find partners? How did they decide who to have children with? How did they avoid having children with people who were too closely related? And how did a species living in tiny scattered groups eventually become billions of people? The answer starts with something that is easy to forget. Your ancestors didn't live in a world full of strangers. They lived in a world where everyone knew everyone. Imagine waking up in a camp 100,000 years ago. There are people around you. Someone is feeding the fire. Someone is preparing food. Someone is repairing a tool. Children are moving between adults. Someone is sleeping. Someone is watching the surroundings. There is no bedroom door, no private house, no place where you can completely disappear. Your entire social world is right there. And that changes the way relationships work, because when your group is small, your choices affect everyone. If two people become partners, it isn't just their business. Their families know, their friends know, the entire group knows, and eventually a child arrives. That child isn't growing up in a house with only two parents. The child grows up surrounded by other people, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, older children, other adults, people who know the family, people who have watched the child grow. And this matters because human babies are extremely dependent. A newborn can't walk away from danger. It can't find food. It can't make fire. It can't protect itself. It can't survive alone for years. So raising a child required something more than simply giving birth. It required cooperation, and cooperation may have been one of the biggest reasons humans survived. But there was another problem, something much more difficult. Small groups cannot stay completely isolated forever. Imagine a group living in one valley. Another group lives several days away. They rarely see each other. Maybe they meet at certain places. Maybe they follow the same animals. Maybe they know that another group exists somewhere beyond the hills. And when those groups meet, something important can happen. They can exchange food. They can exchange tools, they can exchange information, they can avoid fighting, and people can move between groups. This is important because humans didn't live as one giant family. They lived in small communities connected to other communities, and that creates a much bigger social network. One group knows another, that group knows another, and suddenly the world isn't just the 30 or 50 people around your fire. There are other people beyond the horizon, people you've never met, and among them, there are potential partners. This may have helped humans avoid the dangers of staying isolated for too long, because if a tiny group repeatedly had children only within the same small circle, the number of possible partners would eventually become extremely limited. So humans had a reason to maintain connections with people outside their immediate group, and those connections could become extremely valuable. But here's something even more important. Ancient humans weren't simply looking for someone who could have children. They were living in an environment where survival was difficult. So a partner wasn't just a romantic choice. A partner could also be another person who could hunt, gather food, carry things, make tools, build shelters, protect children, maintain a fire, and survive difficult seasons. In other words, relationships were connected to survival, but that doesn't mean ancient humans had some simple formula for choosing partners. There wasn't one universal system. Different human groups lived differently. Different cultures developed different traditions. And we cannot look at one ancient society and assume every human group behaved the same way. But we do know something important. Humans are extremely social animals, and our children require years of care. That means relationships weren't only about producing children, they were also about keeping those children alive. Think about a baby born during winter. The mother needs food. The baby needs warmth. Someone needs to maintain the fire. Someone needs to protect the shelter. Someone needs to gather food. Someone needs to watch the surroundings. The entire group has a reason to care about what happens next. Because the survival of one child isn't just the survival of one person. That child could become another hunter, another gatherer, another toolmaker, another parent, another person who carries knowledge into the next generation. And this creates something remarkable. Knowledge begins to travel through families. A child watches an adult make a stone tool. The child watches again and again. Eventually, the child tries. The first attempt is terrible. Then another. Then another. Eventually, the child learns, and years later, that same child teaches someone else. The same thing happens with hunting, with plants, with fire, with shelter, with clothing, with everything humans needed to survive. So when an ancient human had a child, they weren't simply creating another body. They were creating another carrier of knowledge. And that changes the story completely, because now imagine this happening for thousands of years. One generation has children. Those children survive. They grow up. They have children. Their children survive. Then another generation, then another, and another. The numbers slowly begin to grow, but they don't grow smoothly. Some years are terrible. A drought arrives. Food disappears. A disease moves through a group. A winter lasts too long. A hunting season fails. People die. Sometimes entire communities disappear. Human population growth was never guaranteed. It was fragile, and that makes the fact that we're here today even stranger, because every person alive today comes from a chain of generations that somehow continued. Your ancestors survived the bad years, and their ancestors survived the bad years before them, again and again and again, for tens of thousands of years. But now we reach another mystery. If humans were living in tiny groups, how did they spread across an entire planet? Because having children is only the beginning. Those children have to survive, then their children have to survive, and eventually, they have to move. Humans began spreading into new environments, across grasslands, through forests, into deserts, across mountains, and eventually into some of the coldest places on Earth. Every new environment created new problems. New animals, new plants, new climates, new dangers, and every generation had to learn. A child born into one environment could grow up knowing things that would be completely useless somewhere else. So children didn't just inherit genes, they inherited information: where to find water, which plants to avoid, how to track animals, how to build a shelter, how to survive the cold, how to use fire, how to make tools, and how to raise the next generation. This is one of the strangest things about humans. A human child spends years learning how to be human, and that long childhood may have been expensive, but it gave our species something incredibly powerful: time to learn. A young human could watch older people, copy them, make mistakes, try again, and eventually become useful. Then the child became an adult, and the adult became a teacher, and eventually an ancestor. But let's go back to the original question. How did ancient humans have children? The basic answer is obvious. They formed relationships and reproduced. But that simple answer misses the real story, because the interesting question isn't just how. It's how humans made reproduction work inside a world of tiny groups, dangerous environments, and extremely dependent children. And the answer seems to involve something humans became unusually good at: cooperation. Humans could form long-lasting relationships. They could share food. They could care for children. They could maintain connections between groups. They could teach younger generations. And they could remember people who came before them. That's powerful, because most animals don't build their entire lives around passing knowledge from one generation to another in the way humans do. A human child doesn't have to discover everything from scratch. Someone already knows. Someone can teach. And that means every generation can start slightly ahead of the previous one. One generation learns how to make a better tool. The next generation learns it, then improves it. Someone discovers a better way to hunt. Someone else remembers it. Someone learns how to survive a particular winter. The next generation hears the story. And eventually, thousands of tiny discoveries become a civilization. But none of that happens without children. And none of those children exist without parents. And none of those parents exist without the generations before them. So when you look at yourself, you're looking at the end of an almost impossibly long chain. Somewhere far back in that chain, there was a child. That child had parents. Those parents had survived long enough to raise them. Their parents had done the same, and again, and again. Through ice ages, through migrations, through hunger, through disease, through predators, through countless moments when the entire chain could have broken. But it didn't. And eventually, one of those descendants became you. Think about that. There was a human being tens of thousands of years ago who had no idea what a city was, no idea what a country was, no idea what a computer was, no idea what the internet was, no idea that billions of people would one day exist. They probably had no concept of the future beyond the next season. And yet, their child survived. And that child's child survived. And that continued for thousands of generations. Until one day, you were born. So the story of how ancient humans had children isn't really a story about romance. It's a story about something much bigger. It's the story of how a tiny population of vulnerable humans kept producing another generation, and another, until those tiny groups became tribes. Tribes became communities. Communities became settlements. Settlements became cities. And eventually, the planet filled with their descendants. You are one of them. Every human being you see is part of that same enormous chain, which means the strangest thing isn't that ancient humans figured out how to have children. The strangest thing is that their children kept surviving long enough to have children of their own. For 100,000 years, the chain never stopped, and you're here because it didn't.